So reinforcing that point that it's the stories that stick. If you need any evidence of that, watch Pixar. If you need any evidence of that, just have a look at what your customers talk about in the blogs and on the social forums. It's not the facts and figures that you share with them, it's the stories that they take away from the day. I'm going to pick on Rob and on Pat in a moment to share the regional themes that bring together your part of the Great Barrier Reef. But I want each of you to start thinking about the story or the theme that binds the products and services that you deliver. Because when we look at what the customer has to try and take in, they need to try and remember the place, the infrastructure, the services, the name of your staff. What they want to remember is the experience. So everything else below that line might disappear in their minds, but they should take away the story of a lifetime that you've shared with them. Like Sam was talking about, the different roles that the characters play in the story. They might get some of the characters mixed up, but they fundamentally remember it. When back in the water 7 years later, the story comes straight back to them. And Pat, I'm going to pick on you first to have a chat about this. But to get that right and to get that theme right, you've got to dig deep. You've really got to understand who you are as a destination or as a product. You've got to talk about who you want to be, what experience you have to offer, the personality that you offer, and then the magical moments come from that. So Pat, talk to us a little bit about the experience theme that binds the Townsville Great Barrier Reef experience together.
Yep. I think from our perspective, it's really about the learning of the reef and the education behind the Great Barrier Reef story. An institution that does it really well in our region is Reef HQ, and I think a wow factor for us that I recently experienced being quite new to the region was a turtle release. So Reef HQ and Sea-Link, with Paul beside me, basically took a rehabilitated turtle from the Reef HQ Turtle Hospital. It was a turtle that became quite known throughout the community and with a number of tourists and visitors. Went out at 7 o'clock on the ferry, and there was about 500 families and children and tourists watching Sea-Link and Reef HQ release this turtle back into the wild. And I think it's the story behind that turtle. It's learning what happened to that turtle. It's learning about the conservation of the reef that really had a profound effect on the children. And also I think with Reef HQ, the fact that they do have video conferencing facilities and are now educating people across the world about our Great Barrier Reef through that system. Just recently they did a classroom of handicapped children in Korea, and watching a live diver speak about the coral reef and the aquarium and the marine life to these children halfway across the world was amazing. So
Sam Ham, who was the author of and the driver of the idea of thematic interpretation, would jump all over that idea. Just think that's the most fantastic thing. The first thing that happened to me when I heard the story was I smiled straight away. That's proof that the theme is holding true. That's what's going to make me remember that story and tell someone when I get home. I'm going to tell somebody else the story that you just told. So a theme that's strong and binding is one that you can hold on to. You might forget whether the kids were Korean or Japanese. You might forget some of the details, but you won't forget the core of that story. So Rob, in promoting the Great Barrier Reef to the world for tropical North Queensland, what's the theme and story that you use to bind that experience together?
Well, there's no doubt that, consistently, it's the accessibility to the range of experiences that are available. And I think the positioning, and it's been consistent in the approach of highlighting, not only are we so close to so much, but we actually offer such a variety of commercial opportunities to experience the natural wonder of the reef. And I think that's in itself a really important positioning for the destination, because we have, quite frankly, without, I don't think, contradiction from Pat or anyone else, the number of different types of experiences that you can have from Port Douglas and Cairns is basically, unchallenged. Yeah. Now, that's one thing. But what the operators are doing in transferring their knowledge and understanding and how technology is playing, we're making some advances. Rod's operation, for instance, is one, not to pick on just one, but he allows people who've had the experience, that wow experience, to bounce up out of the ship and start telling people instantaneously.
That's right.
Now, no more powerful message than the emotion that I feel now
Yeah,
to relay that to the world.
absolutely.
But that's because we're close to it, we've got the operators who are experienced in doing it, but also, you know, I had the Richmond corporates go out, be picked up at the airport, helicoptered over the reef, landed at Palm Cove, and they were just blown away. We won 4 incentive groups out of that, just one event, there and then virtually. And that is the whole idea of the personal emotion coming out. Close,
Yep,
proximity, we're utilising, and because we've got the ability to populate the experience and the knowledge and marine expertise. And I think that's one of the things strong with JCU, the marine expertise we have, the expertise that we have around this room. It's exportable.
yeah,
We've got people that can export their talent and skills to the rest of the world. Hopefully they don't do it too often. But our competitors, of course, are many already,
Yep.
and some of them are very much cheaper than us. But the issue for mine is that we've got to promote value proposition, because the value proposition is second to none.
yeah.
And that's where our advantage has got to be through the operations that we currently have. But choice,
Yep.
closeness, proximity to the actual raw natural attraction. And then there are other aspects that we've, you know, like Pat's example, minke whales, for instance. That has attracted and developed another sense of wow factor and positioning again our destination in the minds of people that possibly haven't thought of us in the same light.
Yeah, exactly right. And an example like the minke whale really brings the story home, doesn't it? It's more than just we've got them, we're looking after them. We've actually got a world-leading research program supporting them, and you can be a part of that. That your experience and contribution isn't taking it away, that you're not wasting that experience, you're actually enhancing it. That you're a part of the conservation of this amazing place. That's the transformational storytelling and theming that we need to do. The same way that Harley Davidson creates a more transformational story. It's not about hogs, it's about a lifestyle. It's not just about the products that you buy that go along with that. It's about what that says about you to the people in your peer group. And what we want is for people to be able to reflect on their moment in the Great Barrier Reef. For many of them, it might be just one day in their life that they get out on the Great Barrier Reef, but we want them to walk away as strong an ambassador as a hog owner is of the investment that they made. And they need to feel a sense of belonging to that story, and they want to be involved in it. So we need to get them involved in telling that story. What I want you to do is I'm going to pick on some of the operators now and get you to share a little bit about either the theme that you use now to interpret the reef, or as you're starting to think in today's session about a theme that you could use. And remember the example that I used of Pixar. Themes are just like the narratives that sit behind any great film. They're universal. It's anger, it's elation, it's cosmic, it's spiritual, it's sex, it's pain, it's patriotism, it's heroes, it's loneliness. Some of our competitors are using this to great effect. Whether it's Central Park trying to say this isn't just a bit of green space in the middle of New York, it's the place that you brought your children to grow and develop. So click on the QR code and see moments in history that were created in Central Park. Our friends in New Zealand talking about stories rather than stuff. The Galapagos saying that we want you to be a part of the conservation of this natural wonder. Sound familiar? Conservation of a natural wonder. I love this story from the Australian just a few months ago. The biggest orgasm in the universe here on the Great Barrier Reef. Sorry humans, it isn't you, it's coral. An old story, one we've told for decades, John, one we've said over and over and over again. In fact, I saw another publication do a similar story a few weeks later, and it was all about the science behind coral spawning, and I nearly fell asleep reading it. And I'm doing a project on the Great Barrier Reef. I love the place, and I nearly fell asleep. This one had me hook, line and sinker. Maybe it says more about me than it says about the journalist. But it picked up on a universal theme. It picks up on something that you want to talk about when there's a quiet moment in the conversation around the coffee hut or standing at a dinner party and someone says, "What have you done recently, Russell, that was really fun and engaging?" You go, "Well, I saw the biggest orgasm in the universe." That's where we need to get to. I didn't know whether you did or not, but I'm sure you have. So For the Great Barrier Reef, what we want to do is start saying, how do we create, as Rod said, that life-changing moment? We want to move from just talking about coral, fish, islands, the infrastructure that makes up that, our pontoons, and start talking, as Alan did, about making a blind person's life-changing moment, about making a grandmother smile for longer than you've ever seen it before. They're the stories that stay with people, that we've got to get inspired about the Great Barrier Reef. With you and through the experience development strategy, we wanted to do this. We want to say, let's stop talking about biggest. Let's stop talking about the biggest reef on the planet or the longest or the most diverse, because from a customer's perspective, with them, what is in it for me? What is in the most diverse reef system in the planet? Well, what we want to be talking about is, as many of you have already mentioned, the world's best reef experience. And if we're going to say that, we've got to be able to deliver it. And if we're going to talk about it, we can talk about the best reef encounters on the planet, where you can see that charismatic grade 8. You can see those huge schools of fish. You can see the diversity of species if your guide has opened your eyes to what diversity you're looking at, so that you know what it is that you're seeing. And that we can cater for a diversity of skill levels. So we can deliver some of the best reef encounters on the planet. We're also the best managed reef on the planet. The science agrees, despite what we talk about in climate change, we still spend more money than any other reef system on making sure we understand it and that we're conserving it. We can deliver some of the best experiences, and I think it was Robbie Bastian who mentioned that from the outset, that it is about the quality of the interpretation, our accredited guides, our accredited operators, the Eye on the Reef program, our commitment to safety. And it is about the best product range and choice, as Rob mentioned, the range of operators, the range of precincts, the range of environments, the accessibility of those things, that you could be in a boardroom one day and immersed in the reef for the whole afternoon. That it can all happen that quickly and that easily, and you can do that safely and without fear that you are damaging the thing that you've come to see. The Barrier Reef's committed to that. So how do you as operators take that story forward? That's an interesting platform to leverage off. But what I want you to think about is taking those ideas of the best reef encounters, the best managed reef, the best product choices and the best experience delivery. Maybe one of those links to your product, Harriet. Maybe one of those is one you could say, that's something we can really own, and we want the world to be talking about why the Great Barrier Reef, through the heli tours that we offer, creates the best reef encounter by touching down on the coral cay and coming back up again. It could be any one of those, or it could be all of them, but what we want is for the world to start bragging about this, not just talking about facts and figures about the Great Barrier Reef, not talking about just the science that underpins it, but what that means for them. So I want you to think about in the context of your own environment. If you're around Townsville, how you pick up on that education theme that Patricia mentioned. If you're in the wild north, the wilderness and the intrepid adventures, or if you hear the adventure that brings this destination to the fore. Not only that range of products that Rob talked about, but that sense of adventure that comes with the Barrier Reef experience. So take your theme and your moment, just like Pixar would do, give it some context in your place, and then start to bring it home. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to walk around and have a look at what you're writing down, and we're going to share back one or two themes from the operator's perspective that either you use now or we could use in the future to get our customers talking about and thinking about the Great Barrier Reef in a different way. Think Pixar, think Sex on the Reef, think sticky stories. Start thinking about things that would get people talking. Don't use words like diversity. Use words like smile on the face. Use human, personal moments and create a strong theme that would get people saying, that's something that I'll remember. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then I will come picking on you once more.